Welcome, this is the Drupal usability meeting for October 14th, 2022. I'm Benji Fisher moderating and sharing my screen. And also present are Aaron McHale, Ralph Kohler, and Simo Helston. So we've been carrying around a few issues waiting for review. Let me just take them from the top. The project messaging channel in core. I started to look at that about an hour ago, and it looks as though the current patch needs some work. And I actually started doing some of that work, doing a reroll and fixing things that PHPStan complained about. So I think maybe next week or soon, sometime soon, but not today, we can look at that one again. Workflow and text for installing themes is confusing. Does anyone want to look at that issue? The appearance page is too long and confusing. Does anyone want to look at that one?
Have we looked at those before? Those sound, I mean, they sound familiar because I've seen them on the issue, but I feel like we've looked at them in the past, but maybe didn't quite. I can't remember if there was like, a reason why they were still there.
One word in regards of workflow and text for installing themes is confusing. That issue is basically referring to the only sole topic that is left out of the meta issue. It's basically about currently you have the titles installed modules and uninstalled modules, and it's basically about that labeling. So that we haven't talked about yet. And the meta issue, from my perspective, I'm not sure if it's necessary to talk about it because it still needs the design input. Otherwise, it couldn't be moved forward. So I'm not sure if it's worth to talk about that, but the workflow in text might be a possible topic. Let's put it that way.
Okay. So let's just open that in a tab for now and come back to it soon. Figure out to do with the install, uninstall modules page. That's something we've looked at recently. We have these two links from September 9th and September 23rd. Shall we continue that discussion?
Yeah, and I think I saw on that issue there was some, I can't remember who posted it, but there's some screenshots around the potential, like how it might look if we redid that UI to look more like admin content. So it might be worth we could certainly look at those, and I think they're based on some earlier feedback that we give. So maybe that's worth looking at.
Okay, well, I would actually like to look at this one. Oh my gosh, look at that issue number. It's only 6 digits.
That's when you know you've got a good one.
All right, so this is issue 573132. Regional to region in description at admin page. And it was opened in 2009. So that was before Drupal 7 was released. So I think the current version was Drupal 6 at that point. And I think we can see pretty easily if I can just open up the site. And we go to admin configuration. It's talking about this, regional and language. which is sort of a confusing part of speech. Let me try to, I have two, oh, I have way too many tabs open in this browser. Okay. So regional, of course, is an adjective, and it seems odd to pair it with a noun such as language. And it's fine for regional settings where the adjective modifies the noun, but it doesn't really make sense in regional and language. So what is the proposed solution? To change it to region and language. Very simple change. I'm sorry, I should not describe anything as simple because that sort of discourages people from asking questions about it. And what I do want to do is ask if there are any questions about what the proposal is. Proposal would be to change this.
I think I could probably give some thoughts. Well, one thought, and that thought can be summarized into one word. Yes. If you'd like more words, yes, let's do it.
Okay, there.
End of thought.
There are some things to discuss, comments 18 and 19. So this looks like it could use more discussion to me. Regional and language settings would be fine here, but a bit duplicative. So that would be grammatically correct. Ralph, go ahead.
Just one thought. Would it make sense to revert it to something like internationalization, maybe? It's just a single word and a noun. And it's a better of an umbrella term than region or regional and language.
Yeah, I kind of agree, but in a way, it's also not international if it's a bilingual country. So then you have a single region and multiple, like one, or actually might even have more languages. So it's kind of not necessarily international, even if it's multilingual. But internationalization is kind of, it's something that we use. So it's kind of would be understood, but it's not like really correct in the real world.
Aaron, go ahead.
If we're looking for a single word, maybe localization, because that's kind of a similar thread, but it's more specific to, as we just Simo was just saying about, you know, the local context or something. I'm also mindful there's you know, we've got down the bottom there, we've got sort of like things to do with translations, and so that is obviously like, you know, internationalization, localization, you know, what have you. But then the things at the top are more about like the overall site settings, you know, region settings, configuring date time formatters. There's almost like you could draw two subsections there in a way, one related to translation and one relating to, I guess, like the global settings or the localization settings, if you like.
So I think the translation options are only available if the translation modules are enabled.
Right.
So,
yes.
Yeah, I wonder if they should have their own section then, because I feel like it, you know, those almost feel like we've got two groups of things there. You've got like things to do with translations, like I said, and then things to do with like, you know, the default, the regional settings, the language, the date time, all the kind of like base site configuration, I guess you could say.
yeah, I guess the languages are awfully close to the translation settings. You can enable different languages without enabling translation. I think that's correct. But they are so closely connected. I wouldn't want to split off translations, the last three items. I would not want to split those off from the languages setting. Agree, disagree? Aaron, do you still think it's a good idea to have a separate section for the last three items?
I don't have any strong feelings. It's just an observation at the moment. I guess if you know languages as it is there, plural, wouldn't actually necessarily, as you said, fit under just a straight translation section. So yeah, maybe they all make sense together. I actually could you maybe open up like the regional settings and because I have to say I've never actually been to that page as far as I'm aware. Yeah, so it's very okay. So a lot of
Default country,
like,
first day of the week, default time zone.
So kind of default settings, and then I almost feel like those are because there's the other screen. There's basic site set information, basic site settings, something like that. I part of me feels like that should be grouped with the the basic site settings one under system. Because that's so closely related to what you do under there as well.
So site name, slogan, email address, front page. You'd like to see the time zone settings here and the default country.
And then funny enough, there's translation system information on as a tab here. So we're clearly a bit all over the place.
Well, that's just provided by the configuration translation module. Right, all of these screens are configuration. I guess regional settings, is there nothing translatable here? It's all check boxes, radio buttons, select lists.
I think, yeah, but I think this shouldn't be on the like system because this can be customized by users, or users can set this stuff to like it can be set per user, I think. So then it shouldn't be on the system, maybe, or I don't know. Actually, it doesn't. It's kind of.
Yeah, I mean that is true, but then these are like the defaults. So
yeah,
the user would override those on their individual, on their user profile settings, right? So
yeah.
part of the. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, does logging use the time zone set there in regional settings? DB log.
Did you say DB log?
Yeah, does it use that time zone from regional settings?
Oh, let me
Because
see.
if it does, then it's more closely connected to system.
So this is showing things 1410, and it's only 1020 today, so that must be UTC. And if I change the default time zone to, oh, this is awful, isn't it? Actually, there we go. To New York. And then I reload the recent log messages. Will all of these timestamps change? No.
I suspect that's probably because you want the, hypothetically, it's possible that you know, that the screen we were just on could throw an error, or there could be an error in the configuration system. So you wouldn't necessarily, you might not want like the log messages to have a dependency on configuration or you know, doing anything too advanced. Like you want this to be as robust as it can be, I guess.
Yeah, so I just duplicated this access denied error. It's trying to access the a password reset link when already logged in. So anyway, I duplicated that, and it is still in UTC, even though I set the time zone to New York.
So
I
in a
guess.
way, that kind of, so it's not really sites, kind of sites time zone in a way.
Let's see, what if I set my personal time zone? Maybe that overrides the default. Yes, my personal time zone overrides the default. So, so the time zone setting is respected on the DB log page, the recent log messages. So I'm sorry, what did you want to say, Simo?
Yeah, I'm just thinking like if it is a user time zone or site time zone, then if kind of
Yeah, I still think that the time zone setting belongs under localization. I think localization is a good technical term for what these are doing. Date and time formats and languages and translation, all of that belongs under localization. I think it's reasonable to group them as is. And I sort of like to just focus on what is the best term for this group. Should we suggest localization? Should we go with suggestion on the issue of region and language?
Yeah, I'm okay with region and language. I think like localization also is a bit of a mouthful. And it's probably, if we're trying to keep things like plain and simple, like region and language is probably more understood than localization, which you're right, could be seen as a kind of more technical way of describing it. So if we want to go with like plain English terms, then region and language is probably good.
And as always, we have to keep the audience in mind. The site administrator who visits a configuration page like this is not expected to be as technically oriented as someone who looks at things under structure, like someone who builds out content types and views. Site configuration is sort of a less technical job than site building. So I think we do want to keep the plainer language on this page. So can we just give a thumbs up to this issue? Change it from regional and language to region and language?
Yeah, I'll defer to my original yes.
And I guess there is the suggestion to use regional and language settings, excuse me, and that goes against the standard dictum that more is less. everything on the configuration page is settings. So adding the word settings is redundant. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, I will be happy to add a comment to this issue. And the change is dead simple. There I go again using the word simple. And it's a one-line change. So we can probably get this one in. You can see I did a little work on the issue summary a few days ago, or maybe a week and a half ago.
I think the only other thing that comes to mind, and maybe this is like something that could be done in a follow-up, but I'm not particularly attached to it, is I do like the idea of bringing the basic site settings and the region and time zone sensitive things sort of like visually closer together, because you've got you've got basic site settings and you go in there and you configure the basic site settings, but then like configure the region and language and the time zone and date and time formatters are kind of somewhat related. So I wonder if in a different, maybe in a separate issue, we suggest changing the order of things on here so that those are more closely grouped together.
Right, and we would want to look at all of the sections on this page when we do that. It is not simply alphabetical. Maybe it's mostly alphabetical, so people has been pushed to the top, and then content authoring development. Oh, then again, media comes after user interface. Gosh, I don't see any rhyme or reason here.
Yeah. It looks like maybe people has been before. It was actually, I think, users before, but if it would have been accounts, then it would have just stayed in the same place with the titles changing. So it might be something that has been alphabetical at some point and then the terms have been changed. But anyways, makes sense to look at it.
Yeah. So let's have a follow-up issue to look at that.
As a sort of, I guess, a side note, and it's not directly related to this issue, but this is a perfect example of where strategically what I'm about to say could be beneficial. With the up and coming sort of moves to GitLab, there's, I believe, and I don't know how confirmed this is, there's more potential to sort of like make issues get done quicker. And I think that's kind of related to something Dries was talking about in his keynote speech about, like, sometimes it can take weeks to get a simple issue done. And I wonder if, particularly for usability issues where it's just an example like this, where it's a one-line text change, if there's a way that we can, using these new workflows, and as we move into start using GitLab and things like that, if there's a way that if the usability group says, this is a simple, quick change, if there's a way to just get that actioned like quicker than currently it would be, where it still has to go through the same, the same people, the same groups. Again, I don't think that's something we could decide, do anything about this meeting, but I think it's something to bear in mind.
Yeah, I think that's also more a question of practice and process than it is of tooling. So we have to look at this 13-year-old issue and say, okay, let's just do it. It is an improvement. If we want to make further refinements, let's do those in follow-up issues rather than dragging out this issue any longer.
Right.
And yeah, I certainly am a fan of the approach that the way to make big progress is with lots of little steps. And I guess maybe I should watch the recording. I assume that was the Dries note at
Yeah.
at Europe recently. I haven't seen that. Let me bring up this recently fixed issue. So this introduces more granular permissions for custom blocks. This is issue 2809291. And I guess I can show it off pretty easily if I go to structure, blocks, custom block library, block types. And then there is now a manage permissions tab. So there is a permission for each block type to edit that particular block type, which you can also see on module block content. Someday we have to add some more ways to navigate to this page. So there's an individual permission for each block type. And I've been following this issue for a while. I did first come across it at one of these usability meetings. But I noticed that it was fixed even though the remaining tasks had these 4 items, one of which is review and commit. That's okay. So I opened up a child issue called remaining tasks for this issue. It is 3315042. And I just listed those things that were left over in the remaining tasks lists. And one of them has been moved to yet another child issue. One of them was done and was just not checked off in the issue summary. But one of the 3 required a small change, sort of a technical change. I don't want to go into too much detail in a usability meeting, but Aaron, I think you would be a good person to review this issue and just fix that technical issue if you don't mind.
Yeah, I can have a look.
Thank you. So again, I didn't want to spend too much time on that one. And then I haven't looked at this one, add list content operation to the content type administration page.
I have looked at that one.
Do you want to talk about that or one of the other ones that we?
I've applied the patch here. I could show if you want.
Okay, so this is issue 2753451. And I will stop screen sharing and you can take over.
Where's comments? Yeah. Basically, oops, I'm in the wrong issue. 1 second. There it is. Basically, that issue just adds another option to the operations in a content type, meaning list content. If you're, for example, the article content type and you click it, then you get to the up there admin content page, and with the content type article, and you get directly there. That's basically the only thing that patch is doing. And there is one comment, I guess by Bojan's, number 29. I'm not convinced this is a good idea. We want
Ralph, we still see your sample Drupal site.
Oops,
Do you want to go back to the issue?
that way. In comment 29, the point was brought up. I'm not convinced this is a good idea. We want to clearly separating listing UIs from editing UIs. We don't have this pattern elsewhere. And if we do, we make the name link to the relevant topic. I'm therefore unsure if we should continue with this path of duplication. I like the connection. I like the connecting the dots, but we need to evaluate a consistent approach to it, not a one-off.
And the first thing that came to my mind was that it shouldn't be the default. So if it's administering content type, the default action shouldn't be listing. So listing content is administering content and not administering content type. So at least not the default.
The usual default is edit.
Yeah.
And I agree. That's the reason why you're on that particular page, to edit a content type and not to go to the list content.
One of the reasons why I would like to be able to get information about the existing content for certain content type is to, first, the most common reason would be to know how many items there are of that content type, like how many nodes of that specific content type, and listing content doesn't give you that information. So I'm wondering, like, why we don't have that anywhere listed. It would be really nice to have something saying that you have this and this many, because unless you know how many lines there is on that page, and then you count from that page. So it would be really nice to have the number of a certain content type, like how many pieces of content there is of certain type, but we don't get that from that list content.
So that would be a very simple change to the view, to just add a view header saying, adding a summary block to the view that defines the content page. And then when you filter on articles, you would see a summary of how many articles there are on the page.
You mean the count of the content of on that page?
Yeah.
Okay. Not on the content types page.
I would think, actually, so one idea that came to mind is I'm kind of I'm not sure if like having list content in the operations column is necessarily the best idea, because like everything else there is directly related to manipulating that content type, whereas this takes you to view the content. What we could do is add a column, an additional column here, probably like after description, that has the amount of items, and then links. Also, link is a link that takes you to that the content page, because I think that there is value in having the number of items on this page, particularly if you're like, okay, say you come here because you're deleting a content type, like you probably want to be absolutely sure that there's no other content using, there's no content using that content type. So to validate that, by saying, 0 content items or something, or 200 content items, I probably shouldn't delete that one. Or if you're even, if you want a quick way to see that number and also get to the list page, that kind of would address both of those at the same time.
Yeah, I think I agree that it should not be in the operations column. And another reason for that is that most of the things listed under operations are separate tabs on the same page.
Yep.
I think delete is not a separate tab. But then there's the expectation, oh, if I click anything on this list, I'll be able to get to anything else on the list just by choosing a different tab on the same page. And that expectation would be broken if you go to list content. So I think we have consensus that putting it here is a bad idea. I certainly think Aaron's suggestion of a new column is worth considering.
One idea, would it, instead of an extra column for the list content action, maybe use a similar pattern used on that page? So basically make article or basic page a link, like here for the content list, and it's like on the content you go to the node, and instead here, if you click article, you go to the list page.
That would have the advantage that it doesn't add any more clutter to the page. We're just making a link out of something that's already there. I kind of think it has problems with discoverability, like there might not be an expectation. Although if you add a count just in the name column, then that might make it clearer that what you're going to is the listing, or maybe the count could be the link.
Ah.
Yeah, I'm sort of that did briefly cross my mind, but I think there's also the expectation, like if you see a list page like this and there's like an existing pattern of if the name is a link, it'll take you to the view or canonical page for that thing you're looking at. So if we made the name column a link to the content view, that kind of breaks that pattern. I think like if we had the count there and had the count as a link, that would probably be okay. I wonder what the best way to communicate that would be, that it's taking you to, I guess it's okay, it's taking you to the list page, but then like, are we then like, you know, generally like one column serves one purpose, so does it make sense to have one column serving two purposes? I'm not sure on that one.
And it would take up a little more space to have a separate column, but then it would also have the counts more aligned.
Yeah, there's an advantage in the way that it's laid out, where like if you have a lot of content types, it's probably a good thing if if the counts are on their own column, because then you can just scan down that column.
And also it's possible to, well, I think usually it's best, in my opinion, to align numbers, align them to right. So it would be also possible if it's a separate column.
Just also as a side note, while we're looking at this page, it's that without this patch, I'm pretty sure the default operation is manage fields, which always annoys me because like it really should be edit.
1 second, I just wanted to go on another Oops, commerce ACA. Contact. Yeah, manage fields. I thought it was added. Oh.
Yeah, that's probably something for a separate issue, because really those operations should probably be in the same order as the local tasks.
I think that's a conscious decision, and the idea is that you might visit manage fields frequently when you're building the site, and you probably, when you create the content type, you fill in everything that goes on the edit tab.
Yeah, that's probably a good point, that it's used and what's the most frequently used one. Okay, never, just ignore me for now. I'll think about that more.
Ralph, could you bring back the issue? I'd like to see the response to Boyance's comment.
1 second, where is the issue? Ah, there it is. Too many windows.
The reason we raised this issue in the first place was because other similar things do have their content listings linked in the same way. Taxonomy terms can be listed from the vocabulary structure pages. Menu items can be listed from the menu structure pages. Really, what we were trying to do here is being more consistent, not less. Is that a valid point from the structural point of view and from the usability point of view?
I don't think menus are a good example, because menus, the edit form on menu serves too many purposes. It's the edit form and the menu list, which is not great. So I wouldn't.
Yeah, click on edit menu for any one of these.
That they, yeah.
And it, as Aaron says, it combines the edit, which is just those two fields at the top, and then the list.
Yeah, I think we've set a precedent at previous meetings that that's not a good idea. So, but I see their point. I think that the difference here is with menu is, specifically, again, what you're doing is you're going to a page where you're manipulating the menu itself. Like, you're not going to a completely different part of the UI. There's no other way. Like, there's no other way to manipulate the menu other than going through this list. And I mean, well, I don't want to get technical, but technically you're updating the content, the config entity, right? Whereas on the content page, or the content types, what this link would do is it would take you from the config entities to the content entities.
But that's something that actually, I think I don't have a recent site here open, but I think we have that on node page. We have a manage display that takes you to kind of the wrong place, where it's sometimes it could be hard to find back. So there is with node page, I think we have a manage display. I think it's manage display because I have the sites here in Finnish.
Yes,
so
manage display.
On the tabs, not in the operations.
Not in the operations.
No, it might be something that used to be there, because I was looking at 7 site and I have 1.8 site here as well.
The only thing like that comes to mind is with this layout builder. Yeah, it adds a layout tab, but that's still for the individual like piece of content.
layout builder can also be used for the content type, and then it appears on the manage display tab. And I do see manage display as one of the operations on the content types page. Yeah, right there.
Yeah. So in some of the on it, maybe I have some modules enabled because those are actually, yeah, that 7 site is actually a live site, and there I have on nodes that manage display. And I keep seeing that from time to time on like a node view page. That's one of the local tasks, one of the tabs.
Yeah, maybe that's a module you have installed, because I don't recall that.
I see the same thing in having just installed the Umami demo profile. I see the manage display. So why are we talking about manage display? I've lost track.
It's an example where we move from content to structure. So example of having a link in content that goes to structure side.
So, sorry, just to clarify, Benji, are you saying with the Umami demo, when you go to the content, there's a operations link for manage display?
Yes, this page that Ralph is showing us, admin structure types. When I visit that, manage display is one of the options.
Yeah, I mean, I like that's still to do with the content type, though. It's, you know, what everything you do there is related to that content type, not individual pieces of content.
Right, I agree. So
I know taxonomy was an example that was mentioned in that issue.
Yeah, and I think that's the important decision is we have these two comments from Boyance and from Rachel Norfolk. So so today we have consensus that it should not be added under operations, but we're willing to consider a new column for it, for example. Is it or is it not more consistent to do that? So taxonomy is an analogous situation, and certainly, yeah, from this page, you can list the terms, and that's showing content. Ooh, ugly. Devel generate has its uses, but but the Umami demo profile also has its uses. So you can list terms, and you can also add fields to the vocabulary or make other changes. So I think that both from a technical point of view and a usability point of view, it's a good analogy. And that suggests that that it is a good idea to add a link to this page, just not in the operations column.
Yeah, so the thing that's different with taxonomy is you still remain within the same part of the structure. You still, like, the breadcrumb still takes you back to where you were. The URL is still within, like, below where you were. Like, you're not actually taking it. The difference would be is if this took you to like the user facing taxonomy list, then that would be a precedent. I'm not saying it would be a good precedent, but this is not a like for like in that sense, right? So if, for instance, we were adding a new
Just a sec.
list
Ralph,
tab.
can you scroll up so we can see the breadcrumb? You can see what Aaron's talking about. Okay,
Yeah.
Sorry.
thanks. Go ahead, Aaron.
So if, for instance, we were replicating this for content types, then yeah, it probably would make sense to add a list operation, because we would also then have a list local task, and the breadcrumb would still be within the same part of the structure. That isn't the case with what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is saying you're under structure content types. Here's a link that's going to take you to a completely different part of the site structure. So the breadcrumb isn't consistent, the URL wouldn't be consistent. So therefore, that doesn't, from an information architecture perspective, probably shouldn't be grouped with the other operations. It probably needs to be separate.
Okay, so that's you're just giving another argument for not listing it under the operations column. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think it's important we don't confuse like existing precedents as a reason to do something when like they're not, it's not a total like for like kind of situation.
Okay. We do have to wrap this up. We have just a few minutes. Are we ready to say yes or no that it's a good idea to add it, just not in the suggested column? Aaron gives a thumbs up. Anyone else?
Oops. Yeah,
And-
thumbs up for me. I don't see the emoji.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Then the only question is who wants to leave the comment, and I think we'll agree that we should go ahead with the issue, but we should make it a separate column rather than put it in the operations column, or possibly consider adding it to the first column. And it would be nice in the new column to have a count. So would anyone like to leave that comment? No volunteers?
I guess I can do it because I was made the argument about like the precedent, the existing precedent versus like how we should treat this. Or
Okay, thank you. And the other issue we discussed, I said I would leave the comment. So I think we're ready to wrap up. Any closing comments? Oh, Simo, you have the display module. I hate that.
So those are actually like one of the sites is from 2015.
Okay.
Sites, and it's kind of because I didn't have enough time to update it.
Yeah.
Or redesign it.
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming, and I'll be here again next week. Hope you can make it.
Yeah.
great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.
You too. Bye.
Bye.